The sun was dipping low over the dusty plains of the southwest, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers over the rugged landscape. Jack McAllister, a lean and weather-beaten cowboy, rode hard across the terrain, his horse's hooves pounding the dry earth. The day had been unforgiving, blazing sun, relentless heat, and little water, and Jack's throat was parched, his body weary. He needed a place to rest before nightfall, and fast. Jack had been trailing a herd of wild mustangs for days, hoping to capture one for himself or to trade. But as evening approached, the thought of any shelter, no matter how humble, was more tempting than the chase. The vast openness of the plains was beautiful, but it left one exposed. Predators, both animal and human, lurking beyond the horizon made survival uncertain. In the distance, beneath a cluster of tall mesquite trees, Jack spotted what looked like a small shelter. Smoke rose lazily from a thin chimney, curling upward against the fading light. Relief surged through him. Maybe someone was home, maybe they'd have water, maybe a fire to warm him. He nudged his horse forward cautiously, eyes scanning for any signs of danger. As he drew near, the shelter revealed itself to be a modest but sturdy adobe hut, surrounded by a circle of drying herbs and small stone figurines. It wasn't much, but it was clearly cared for. A wooden door stood slightly ajar. Jack dismounted and tied his horse to a nearby tree. His boots crunched softly on the gravel path leading to the entrance. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. Inside, the shelter was simple yet cozy, illuminated by the last rays of sunlight filtering through a small window. A fire smoldered low in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls decorated with intricate beadwork and hand-painted symbols. The smell of sweetgrass and sage filled the air, calming Jack's racing heart. He moved quietly, looking for any sign of inhabitants. No one was immediately visible. A woven blanket lay folded neatly on a wooden bench. Bowls of food sat untouched on a table, and a waterskin rested near the hearth. It was clear someone had been here recently. Jack felt a flicker of guilt. He had no right to enter another's home, but desperation had pushed him beyond caution. He reached for the waterskin, tipping it back and drinking deeply, the cool liquid soothing his dry throat. Suddenly, a soft noise startled him. From the far corner, a figure emerged, slender and graceful. A young woman with dark eyes like polished obsidian and long black hair braided with feathers stood before him, hands resting lightly on a bow slung over her shoulder. Jack's breath caught in his throat. "I'm sorry," he stammered, stepping back. "I didn't mean to intrude." The woman's gaze was steady but unreadable. "Who are you?" she asked in a quiet, commanding voice. "A traveler," Jack replied cautiously. "A cowboy, passing through. I was looking for shelter, some water." She studied him carefully, then nodded. "You are lucky I was not here when you came in. This is the shelter of Ioka." Jack blinked. "Ioka?" The woman's lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. "I am the daughter of Chief Nan. This is my home." Jack felt his stomach tighten. He had trespassed into the domain of a powerful Apache family, and now stood face to face with the chief's daughter, a woman who was known not only for her beauty, but for her fierce spirit and unmatched skill with the bow. For a moment, the room held a tense silence. Then, Ioka said, "You will explain yourself, cowboy." Jack nodded, realizing that his fate, his very life, might hinge on his answer. Jack swallowed hard, the weight of Ioka's steady gaze pinning him in place. Her presence was commanding, calm, yet unmistakably powerful. This was no ordinary woman. She carried the authority of a leader's bloodline. The air in the shelter seemed to thicken with the gravity of the moment. I was riding through the area," Jack began, choosing his words carefully. "I'm sorry for entering without permission. I was tired and thirsty and thought I might find shelter." His voice was honest, tinged with humility. "I didn't know this was your home." Ioka's dark eyes softened ever so slightly, but the sharpness in her voice didn't wane. "Many do not respect the land or the people who live upon it." She gestured toward the door. "You should be more careful. There are dangers here that go beyond thirst or fatigue." Jack nodded, feeling the sting of his mistake. "I understand. I've had my share of close calls out here." She stepped closer, and Jack noticed the intricate beadwork on her clothing, symbols of her tribe and status. "You are lucky I was here. The chief would not be so forgiving." Her voice carried a warning, but also something else, a trace of curiosity. Jack scratched the back of his neck, glancing around the room again. "If I may ask, what do you do here?" "This shelter. It's unlike others I've seen on the plains." Ioka studied him for a moment, then sat on the bench near the hearth, motioning for him to join. He hesitated but followed suit. "This is more than a shelter," she explained. "It is a place of refuge and learning. Here, I connect with the spirits of my ancestors, Prepare for what lies ahead, and carry on the traditions of my people. Jack leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. Your people, the Apache. I've heard stories both from friends and enemies. They say your tribe is fierce, proud, and unyielding. Ioka's lips curved into a faint smile. We fight to protect our land and our way of life. Many outsiders see us as savages, but they do not understand our history, our honor. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the history that surrounded him. He had grown up hearing one side of the story tales spun by settlers and soldiers. But this was a perspective he'd never truly known. Suddenly, the distant sound of hooves pounding against the hard earth interrupted their conversation. Both looked toward the door, tension snapping in the air. Ioka rose quickly, moving to peer outside through a small window. Trouble, she said quietly. We must prepare. Jack stood as well, heart pounding. What kind of trouble? She met his eyes, her expression serious. The soldiers. They are scouting these lands again. They will not hesitate to attack if they find us. Jack's mind raced. He knew all too well the brutal clashes between the settlers and the native tribes. He had witnessed skirmishes and bloodshed, and the thought of innocent lives caught in the crossfire weighed heavily on him. What can I do to help? He asked without hesitation. Ioka considered him for a moment, then nodded. You are a stranger here, but your heart seems true. If you are willing to stand with us, you will need to earn our trust and prove your loyalty. Jack squared his shoulders. I'm ready. She handed him a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Take this to the others in the valley. It contains medicine and supplies. It is important they receive it before nightfall. Jack accepted the package, feeling the responsibility settle over him like a cloak. I won't let you down. Ioka's gaze softened, the fierce warrior giving way to something almost tender. Be careful, Jack McAllister. The plains are wild, and so are the hearts of those who live here. As he mounted his horse and rode off toward the valley, Jack felt a new purpose stirring within him. What had started as a simple quest for shelter had turned into something much larger. Journey into a world he had only glimpsed from afar. And at the center of it all was Ioka, the chief's daughter, whose strength and courage would soon become his guiding light. Jack urged his horse forward, the bundle of medicine and supplies securely fastened to his saddle. The valley stretched out before him, framed by jagged cliffs and swaying grasses that whispered secrets in the wind. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the sky awash in deep oranges and purples. His thoughts swirled, Ioka's words echoing in his mind. Be careful. The plains are wild. He knew the dangers weren't just in the terrain but in every shadow that might conceal a hostile enemy. The valley was home to a hidden Apache village, nestled between the rocky outcrops and surrounded by thick brush. It was a place few outsiders had ever seen, and fewer still had been welcomed into. The village was small but vibrant, alive with the sounds of laughter, work, and tradition. As Jack approached the narrow path guarded by two young warriors, he raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. Carry supplies from Ioka, he said firmly. The warriors eyed him cautiously but stepped aside after a brief exchange. Jack entered the village, his boots soft against the earth. Children ran past him, curious but unafraid, while elders tended fires and prepared food. At the center of the village stood a large communal hut, its walls adorned with paintings telling stories of battles won and lives cherished. Inside, the chief and other leaders gathered, their faces marked by wisdom and scars alike. Jack approached the chief, an imposing figure with silver streaks in his black hair, and eyes that seemed to pierce the soul. I bring the medicine and supplies, Ioka sent, Jack said, presenting the bundle. The chief's gaze was steady. You have done well, stranger, but words mean little here. Actions prove loyalty. Jack nodded, knowing the path ahead would be hard, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something stronger than survival-hope. Jack stayed in the village for the night, the flickering firelight revealing faces both curious and wary. He knew the path to acceptance wasn't easy, especially for an outsider, a cowboy stepping into the heart of Apache land. Morning came with a chorus of birds and the scent of sage burning low in the air. Jack was invited to join the warriors on their morning patrol, a test not only of his skill but of his intentions. Mounted on a swift horse, Jack rode alongside Ioka and two other warriors. The landscape was beautiful, yet unforgiving. Rocky ridges, thorny brush, and open plains where danger could strike at any moment. Ioka led the way silently, her senses sharp and movements fluid. Jack struggled to match her pace and focus, but he was determined. The trust of these people and, especially Ioka, meant more than he had expected. Suddenly, A rustling from the nearby thickets caught their attention. Hands tightening on bows and rifles, the group halted. Out from the brush stepped a lone scout, breathless and wide-eyed. Soldiers spotted near the east ridge. They're scouting. They'll be here by nightfall. Ioka's expression hardened. We must prepare. Jack looked at her, feeling the weight of the moment. This was no longer just a mission to deliver supplies. It was a battle to protect a people and a land that had been betrayed too many times. Let me help, Jack said quietly. I know these plains, and I can fight. Ioka studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, but remember, trust is earned not just with words, but with your heart and your actions. As the sun climbed higher, the village transformed into a hive of preparation. Jack found himself swept up in the rhythm mending fences, sharpening weapons, and learning the ways of the Apache fighters. It was hard, humbling work, but for the first time, Jack felt connected, like he belonged to something bigger than himself. The sun beat down mercilessly as Jack stood atop a rocky ridge, scanning the horizon with the sharp eyes of a seasoned scout. The valley below was quiet, but Jack knew that silence often meant something was coming. Ioka was beside him, her bow resting casually on her shoulder, but her gaze was fierce and focused. They're coming, she said quietly. The soldiers will try to catch us off guard. Jack nodded, feeling the adrenaline course through his veins. He had never faced an enemy quite like this, a well-armed force, marching to impose their will on a land and people who only wanted peace and freedom. Back in the village, preparations were underway. Women and elders moved supplies to hidden caches while warriors took their positions along the ridge and narrow passes. Jack worked alongside them, learning their signals, their battle cries, and their unwavering courage. As the day turned to dusk, the first sounds of hooves echoed through the valley. The soldiers appeared over the ridge like a dark cloud, armored, disciplined, and ready. Ioka raised her hand, signaling the warriors. Hold your ground, strike only when I give the word. Jack's heart pounded. This was the moment he had prepared for, the moment that would define his place in this world. The soldiers advanced cautiously, unaware of the hidden archers lining the cliffs above. Suddenly, a volley of arrows rained down, striking horses and men alike. Chaos erupted. Jack fought with a fury he hadn't known he possessed, protecting the village and its people as if they were his own family. Side by side with Ioka, he dodged bullets and swung his rifle, the battle cries ringing in his ears. Despite their smaller numbers, the Apache fighters used their knowledge of the land to their advantage, ambushing, retreating, and striking again with precision. Hours passed like minutes until finally, the soldiers began to retreat, their forces broken and morale shattered. Breathing heavily, Jack looked around at the battered but victorious warriors. Ioka approached him, eyes shining with fierce pride. You fought well, cowboy. You have earned your place here. Jack smiled, the exhaustion in his body matched by a sense of belonging he had never felt before. The dawn, following the battle, rose soft and golden, casting a gentle light over the valley now scarred but alive. Jack sat by the fire outside the communal hut, nursing a bandaged arm and watching as the village slowly returned to its rhythm. The soldiers' retreat had bought them time, but Jack knew the threat was far from over. The tension lingered like smoke in the air, reminding everyone that peace was fragile here. Ioka joined him silently, settling beside him with a calm presence that contrasted with the storm inside Jack's mind. You have done more than survive, Jack, she said quietly. You fought alongside us when many would have turned away. He looked at her, feeling a new respect and something deeper stirring. I didn't want to run, not this time. She smiled, a rare softness crossing her features. This land, these people, they fight not just for themselves but for generations to come. You understand that now? Jack nodded. I want to stay, to help, but I know there's more to this fight than just soldiers. Ioka's expression grew serious again. The settlers will keep coming. They seek to claim what isn't theirs. We must be ready, not just with weapons, but with alliances and wisdom. Over the next days, Jack immersed himself in the village's life. He learned their stories, their customs, and the sacred ceremonies that bound them to the land and to each other. In turn, he shared his knowledge of the settlers' ways, their weaknesses, and their strengths. Slowly, the lines between outsider and insider blurred. But peace was fleeting. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, a scout arrived with grave news: another force was approaching, larger and more determined than before. Ioka stood before the gathered warriors, her voice steady. This is not just a fight for land. It is a fight for our identity, our freedom, and our future. Jack clenched his fists, ready to face whatever came next. He was no longer just a cowboy passing through, he was a part of something greater, a protector of a people he had come to respect and care for. The air was thick with tension as the new force approached the village. More soldiers, better equipped, and driven by the promise of conquest. The Apache warriors prepared themselves, their faces painted with symbols of courage and protection. Jack stood beside Ayoka, their eyes locked with a shared determination. This was more than a battle. It was a stand for survival, for honor, and for the right to live free on their land. As the enemy drew near, Ayoka raised her bow and signaled the attack. The valley erupted in a whirlwind of motion, arrows flying, rifles cracking, horses galloping through dust clouds. Jack fought fiercely, every move fueled by the bonds he had forged. He fought not just for himself, but for the people who had welcomed him, taught him, and trusted him. The battle was brutal and long, testing every ounce of strength and willpower. The soldiers pressed forward, but the Apache fighters used every advantage the land provided: hidden paths, steep cliffs, and the element of surprise. At a critical moment, Jack found himself face to face with a commanding officer. Their eyes met, a clash, not just of weapons but of worlds. With steady hands, Jack disarmed the man, signaling the end of the fight. The soldiers, seeing their leader defeated, began to retreat. The valley grew quiet once more, save for the ragged breathing of those who had survived. Ayoka approached Jack, her eyes shining with fierce pride and gratitude. "You have done more than earn your place here. You have become family." Jack smiled, feeling the weight of the journey settle into his heart. "I'm home now." As the sun set behind the cliffs, painting the sky with shades of fire, the village gathered to celebrate not just victory, but the unbreakable spirit of a people determined to live free. Jack looked around at the faces lit by the dancing flames, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together.